The lights above flickered as Lieutenant Cade moved slowly through the damaged corridor. The walls were scorched from the last blast, and smoke curled from broken vents. His boots echoed on the metal floor, while sparks rained from the ceiling like fireflies trapped in a storm. Cade didn't expect to be down here. The ship had suffered a surprise attack near the edge of the hollow belt. A pirate ambush had punched a hole through the lower decks. Now, he was deep in an abandoned section that didn't even appear on the map, a place forgotten by design. He held his blaster steady. Every step forward was cautious. The deeper he went, the stranger it felt. The walls changed color slightly, dull orange giving way to something older, darker, colder. Pipes hummed softly, but something else pulsed under the metal, like a heartbeat buried in steel. At the end of the passage, he reached a large, rusted door hanging half open. The room beyond it was dim, filled with steam that floated just above the floor. Strange symbols had been etched into the walls long ago. Some glowed faint red. His eyes followed the carvings until they stopped at a figure in the center. A girl sat there, still, silent. Her skin was smooth and dark blue, and her arms and legs were wrapped in thick chains that linked her to the wall. She looked young but not fragile. Her hair was black, messy, wild. Her eyes were glowing softly in amber gold. They didn't blink. They watched. Cade's voice came out quiet. "Are you injured?" She didn't answer. She tilted her head slightly and spoke with calm words that made his stomach turn cold. "Don't free me," she said. "Only chains keep the monster inside." He frowned. "What do you mean?" he asked. "What monster?" She didn't move. "Me," she said. "Not always, but sometimes. I lose myself. I don't know when or why, but when it happens, people die. Too many. I asked them to chain me, and they did." Cade took a step closer, scanning the chains. They weren't standard restraints. These were old, reinforced with symbols, maybe even something ancient. He had never seen anything like them on any prison ship or war transport. Whoever built this place had done so to keep something hidden, not just held. "You've been down here a long time," he said. "How have you survived?" The girl looked away for a moment. "I don't need food the same way you do. I sleep most of the time. I dream of fire, and of silence after the fire fades." Cade lowered his weapon slightly. She didn't look dangerous, but she didn't look safe either. She looked like something forgotten by the galaxy for good reason. Still, he didn't believe in curses. He believed in war science, and what his own eyes told him. He crouched closer and looked into her eyes. "If what you're saying is true, why tell me? Why not let me go?" "Because you're going to decide," she said. "And if you make the wrong choice, people will suffer. Again. And I'll remember their screams in my sleep." Suddenly the ship groaned from above. A deep rumble vibrated through the floor. A support beam cracked in the hall behind him. The structure wouldn't last much longer. He didn't have time to call command. He had to act now. Her eyes met his again. "Please," she said softly. "Don't be a hero. Heroes always die first." His hand hovered near the lock on her chains. The warning in her voice was clear, but the part of him that couldn't walk away was louder. His fingers closed around the ancient clasp. The clasp was warm to the touch, pulsing slightly under his fingers like it had a heartbeat of its own. Cade paused, studying the glow along the engraved surface. The lock didn't have any buttons or obvious mechanism. It wasn't technology from Earth or any known colony. It felt alive in a way that made his skin crawl. The girl's voice came again, softer this time, but firm. "You still have time to walk away. Leave the hold. Seal the door. Pretend I was never here." That's what the last one did. Cade's eyes flicked to her face. What happened to him? Her eyes didn't blink. He changed his mind. He opened one lock. That was enough. I don't remember what I did next, but the blood never washed off the walls. He stepped back quickly, not out of fear, but caution. He looked around the room, taking in the carved markings on the floor. They formed a circle, detailed and symmetrical. He hadn't noticed them before because the steam had hidden the pattern. It was a containment ring. "You were part of something," he said. "An experiment? A weapon? Or something worse?" She didn't nod. She didn't deny it either. Her hand stayed on her knees, still bound in thick black metal. Her head tilted slightly, as if remembering pain that had no words. I was created for war. But the war ended. I didn't. They didn't know how to destroy me. So they built this place and left me here. The ship shuddered again. A pipe burst behind him, sending a loud hiss of steam into the air. Cade didn't flinch. His focus was on the girl. Her calmness made everything more dangerous. If she had screamed or begged, it would have been easier, but she just watched him like someone who had already accepted the worst. He tapped his comm link, but it only returned static. They were too deep in the lower hold. No one was coming. He had to decide alone. "Tell me your name," he said finally. "I don't remember my real name," she said. "They call me Subject 11 Black. But I'm not that anymore. Not all the time." He took a breath. "If I find a way to move you without breaking the chains, will you come peacefully?" Her lips tightened slightly. "If you keep the chains on. If you don't speak certain words out loud. And if you're ready to kill me the moment I lose control, then yes, I'll come with you." The words were hard to hear, but they didn't sound like a threat. They sounded like a plan. A warning shaped by guilt. He nodded slowly. "All right, we'll do it your way. But if we get out of here, you're going to tell me everything. Who made you? What you did? And what happens if those chains fail?" "I will," she said. "Just promise me one thing. If you hear me speak in a language you don't understand, shoot me. No hesitation. It means he's waking up." He didn't ask who he was. He didn't want to know yet. Instead, he stepped around her carefully, inspecting the base of the wall where the chains were bolted. There was a power lock connected to an old energy core, barely working. If he could disconnect it without triggering the release, the chains would stay shut, but she could still move. He pulled out his toolkit and began working in silence. She closed her eyes again, sitting as still as a statue, waiting. Minutes passed. Then, with a faint hiss and a spark, the anchor detached from the wall. The chains tightened slightly, then loosened. She stood up slowly, still bound but now able to walk. The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees in seconds. She took her first step with slow grace, her bare feet making no sound on the cold metal floor. The chains dragged behind her, scraping lightly. Every movement she made seemed deliberate, like she was holding something back from inside her own body. Cade watched closely, blaster ready at his side. She didn't stumble or show weakness. Instead, she moved with the calm focus of someone used to being hunted or feared. The air around her felt heavier now, as if it reacted to her freedom. They walked together through the corridor, passing twisted beams and shattered lights. Cade led the way, checking corners, alert for structural collapse or surviving attackers. She followed behind him in silence. Her glow lit the space between them like a second torch. The ship groaned again, this time longer and louder. Dust dropped from above, and the floor trembled beneath their boots. Cade tapped his wrist console, trying again to reach command. Still only static answered him. They were too deep, too far from the surface deck. "What was the last thing you remember before you were locked away?" he asked over his shoulder. She paused before answering. "A city? Lights in the sky. People screaming. Then silence. I don't know if I caused it or if he did. I only know I woke up and everything around me was ash." He didn't ask more. Her voice had changed slightly when she said he. A deeper echo had crept into her words, like someone else was speaking beneath her voice. They reached a sealed blast door. It was half melted, jammed tight. Beyond it was a cargo elevator, their only way up. Cade pulled out a tool and began to cut through the lock, while she stood still beside him. Her eyes never left the hallway. They had just walked. He noticed her jaw tighten and turned to her. "What is it?" he asked. "They're coming," she whispered. "Not the pirates. Something else. They can smell what I am. They followed the scent of my awakening." Cade cursed under his breath and worked faster. Sparks flew as he sliced through the final bolt. With a heavy creak, the door gave way and slid open just enough for them to pass. She ducked under without hesitation. Inside the lift chamber, the lights were flickering weakly. The backup power was barely holding. Cade punched the control panel. "We got one shot," he said. If this fails, we climb. She didn't reply. Her head turned sharply toward the corridor. Cade followed her gaze and saw nothing. Then he heard it, a low growl, distant but getting closer. It didn't sound like an engine or a voice. It sounded like something dragging its own bones as it crawled. The elevator shook as it began rising. Cade kept his blaster aimed at the door. She stood at his side, calm again, but her chains rattled softly. If they break through before we reach the next deck, she said, you need to shoot the center of my chest. That's where he sleeps. Cade didn't argue. He had stopped doubting her after the first room. Whatever was chasing them, it wasn't human. And neither was she, not completely. The growling faded as they moved upward. For now, they were safe. But he didn't relax. He didn't trust the silence anymore. It felt like the kind of quiet that only came before something worse. When the doors opened at the next level, smoke poured in. Red emergency lights blinked along the ceiling. The control room was just ahead. If they reached it, he could call for help. They stepped out together, side by side. The hallway was filled with thick smoke that burned Cade's throat. He covered his mouth with part of his sleeve and led the way through blinking red lights. The emergency systems had failed on this level. Everything felt unstable and close to collapse. She followed without hesitation. Her chains dragged behind her, but they didn't slow her down. Her glowing eyes pierced the fog like two golden stars. Every time her foot touched the floor, the lights above flickered as if reacting to her presence. Cade spotted a control panel halfway down the corridor. It was cracked but still working. He rushed toward it and began pressing commands. If I can boost the beacon signal, someone will hear us, he said. Even if the bridge is down, we might get picked up by a scout ship. She didn't answer. She had turned away from him, her eyes fixed on something behind the smoke. Her hands clenched at her sides. The chains around her wrists pulsed with red light, glowing brighter as the air grew colder. Cade looked over and saw a shadow forming in the smoke. It was tall, hunched, and unnatural. The shape moved with broken limbs that twisted in wrong directions. Then it stepped into the red light, and he saw its face, or what was left of one. It had no eyes, just holes where light leaked through. Its jaw was open but didn't move. Its skin was pale like dust and stretched tight across bones. It gave off no sound, but Cade could feel its hatred like a storm pressing against his chest. She stepped in front of him and raised her chained arms. Her voice was sharp. Don't speak. Don't move. If it senses fear, it attacks. If it hears its name, it awakens fully. Cade didn't know its name, and he wasn't afraid to admit he was terrified. But he stayed still, gripping his blaster tighter. The creature inched forward, its body jerking in unnatural angles. It sniffed the air, then stopped in front of her. The creature's head tilted, as if recognizing her. Then it dropped to one knee. It didn't attack. It didn't speak. It bowed. What is it doing? Cade whispered. She answered without looking at him. It remembers me. It was made like me, but its chains broke long ago. Now it serves anything that promises pain. But for a moment, it remembers what I was before the monster took control. Suddenly, the lights above shattered. The hallway trembled and the creature vanished in a blink, sucked back into the shadows. Cade pulled her back toward the panel. We're running out of time, he said. This level won't hold much longer. That thing might come back stronger. She nodded. The more I move, the more they come. I'm like a beacon now. They were waiting for me to rise. Something buried deep is listening. Cade activated the beacon with a final code. The panel sparked and the signal burst upward. Somewhere above them, someone might have heard. He turned to her and said, if we reach the upper hangar, I can launch a signal flare. But we'll have to run. I can protect you for now, she said. But if I fall, don't save me. Don't touch me. You must finish the mission and leave me behind. Cade didn't respond. He just started running and she followed. Their shadows danced behind them in the red glow of the dying ship. The floor above them shook as they climbed the emergency stairwell. Pipes groaned from the pressure, and vents hissed with escaping gas. Every level they passed was darker than the one before, as if the ship was slowly being swallowed from within. Cade pushed forward, sweat clinging to his face. He kept glancing back to make sure she was close. Her steps were steady, but her glow was dimmer now. The red marks on her chains were fading, and her breathing had grown shallow. "You're weakening," he said without slowing. She nodded once. "Every step away from the hold drains me. That place was my prison, but also my anchor. Without it, I start to slip." He starts to stir. Cade didn't like the way her voice cracked when she said it. She sounded more tired than before, like she was holding something inside with every ounce of her strength. The chains weren't just binding her. They were keeping something buried. They reached the top deck just as another explosion echoed from below. The walls shook violently. Part of the corridor collapsed behind them, sealing the path they had just climbed. Cade didn't look back. He grabbed her hand and pulled her forward. The upper hangar was ahead. It was a wide, open chamber filled with broken craft and shattered glass. Smoke curled along the floor like mist. Red emergency lights blinked from corners. But above all that was a beacon tower, still standing. Cade ran to the control panel and checked the system. It was damaged, but not beyond repair. He began working quickly, rewiring broken circuits. "This will take a few minutes," he said. "Just keep watch." She turned away from him, facing the entrance they came through. Her body swayed slightly. Her hands gripped the chains tighter. Her eyes burned brighter for a moment, then dimmed again. A low hum echoed through the chamber. Cade looked up. A rift was forming in the far wall. Not physical, spatial. Like the air itself was splitting. Shapes began to press against it from the other side. Shadows. Claws. Eyes. "They found us," she whispered. "They follow my scent. They are not alive. They are what remains of the others like me. Failed vessels. Emptied of purpose. Filled with hunger." The rift cracked open wider. A screech filled the air. Cade's ears rang from the sound. He kept working, fingers moving faster. Sparks flew from the beacon tower. The screen flickered once, then stabilized. "Almost there," he said. "Hold them off a little longer. Just a minute more." She took a deep breath and stepped toward the rift. Her chains rattled louder, glowing red again. Her feet dragged slightly now. She raised both hands and shouted a word that made the walls vibrate. Cade felt it in his bones. It wasn't a name. It was a command. A command to stop, to remember, to obey. The creatures froze in place. Just for a second. Long enough for Cade to send the flare into the void. It shot out like a comet, bursting through the hangar roof and into the stars. Then she screamed. Her knees hit the floor. Her body arched backward as the red in her chains flared into blinding light. Cade ran to her, but she held up her hand. "Stay back," she gasped. "He's waking up. I can't hold him much longer." Her eyes changed. The glow shifted from amber to pure red. The chains around her arms began to shake violently. Bright cracks of red light split across their surface, glowing hotter with each passing second. Cade stepped back, shielding his eyes as heat surged through the air like a wave. Her breathing turned sharp and shallow. Her eyes were no longer her own. They burned with a red flame, unblinking, wide. Her back arches low. Guttural growl escaped from deep within her chest. The girl was still there, but something else was rising with her. Cade didn't know whether to shoot or run. His hand hovered near his blaster. He had promised not to hesitate. But the sight before him froze his decision. She wasn't attacking. She was fighting it from inside. The rift behind her widened again. The shadow creatures began to move forward, screeching in reply. Their limbs twisted in sick shapes, their eyes hollow. They were drawn to her like starving wolves to fire. Her voice came out sharp and broken. "I can hold him, but only if I move toward them. If I face them, I can push him back. He wants to feed on them. That gives me strength. But I won't be able to come back if I go too far." Cade shouted over the storm of noise. "Don't sacrifice yourself. There has to be another way." She turned her head toward him for a moment. Her expression was calm beneath the pain. "If I don't stop them now, they'll spill into the galaxy. Cities will burn. Planets will fall. This isn't just about me anymore." Cade clenched his fists. He had fought battles before, seen allies die, seen enemies fall, but nothing had ever felt like this. He wasn't just watching a choice. He was watching a war begin inside a single body. She stepped forward, dragging her chains, one heavy step at a time. The ground cracked under her feet. The rift pulsed brighter with every step. The creatures backed away, hissing, sensing something worse than themselves approaching. Red lightning danced across her skin. Her hair lifted in the energy that swirled around her. Her voice deepened, and when she spoke again, it echoed with two tones, hers and something ancient buried beneath. I was made for war. Now I will end it. She raised her arms, and the chain snapped with a sound like thunder. The moment they broke, the rift exploded outward, swallowing her and the creatures in a storm of red and black light. Cade was thrown back against the wall, his ears ringing. When he opened his eyes, the chamber was still. The rift was gone. The creatures were gone. The heat had vanished. Only dust remained where she had stood. Cade pulled himself up slowly. The beacon was still active. The flare had already gone out into space. Help was coming, but she wasn't there to see it. He walked to the center of the room and knelt down. In the ashes, something shimmered. A single chain link, still glowing faint red. He picked it up and held it tightly in his palm. She had warned him this might happen. She had told him to be ready. But he hadn't expected it to feel like losing a friend. Then the link pulsed once in his hand. The chain link in Cade's hand pulsed again, brighter than before. He stared at it in silence. It wasn't hot, but it throbbed like a living thing. He could feel a rhythm within it, like a heartbeat buried in metal. He stood up, eyes scanning the hangar. Nothing moved. The rift was gone. The red storm had passed. But the silence didn't feel peaceful. It felt like the pause before another storm. He tapped his wrist communicator. The signal was working now. A voice broke through the static. Survivor located. Preparing emergency extraction. Stay put and signal flare confirmed. Rescue team inbound. Cade responded with a short confirmation, but his eyes stayed locked on the chain link. He should have felt relief. Instead, he felt watched. A soft sound echoed behind him. He turned fast, weapon drawn. But there was no enemy. Only air bending slightly, like something had stepped through reality, without opening a door. Then he heard a whisper. It came from inside his mind. Gentle. Familiar. You touched the chain. That means you're linked to me now. I'm not dead. Not fully. He's trapped again. But I'm trapped with him. Cade's breath caught. The voice wasn't just in his ears. It was deeper, as if part of her still lived in the metal he held. Where are you? He whispered. Nowhere you can follow, she said. But not gone. The link keeps a path open. If you destroy it, I'll fade. If you keep it, I might return. But it will cost you. Cade clenched his jaw. He had risked everything to get her out, to understand her, to trust her. Now she was asking for something more. Something he didn't yet understand. Above him, the hangar roof split with a deep mechanical hiss. A dropship descended slowly, searchlights cutting through the haze. He didn't wave. He didn't move. He just stared at the glowing link in his hand. What happens if I keep it? He asked. Her voice was quiet now. You'll see things others can't. Feel things no one else will. You'll carry him with you. But also me. My memories. My strength. My curse. The dropship landed. Side hatch opening. 2 armored medics stepped out, calling his name. Cade turned but didn't pocket the chain. He held it in open view. One of the soldiers noticed and flinched. What is that? The medic asked. Why is it glowing? Cade didn't answer. Classified, he said flatly. Ship logs are corrupted. I'll make my full report when we're off this rock. They helped him aboard. The engines roared to life. As the ship rose from the broken hangar, Cade looked down one last time. The place where she had stood was empty, but something deep beneath the metal still pulsed faintly. The medics checked him for wounds, gave him water, asked him questions. He barely listened. His mind was somewhere else. Somewhere between her voice and the feeling in his hand. She had saved him. Saved the galaxy. But she wasn't gone. Not entirely. And whatever she had sealed behind the rift hadn't vanished. It had only been delayed. Cade looked down at the chain link. It pulsed again, slower this time. The transport ship soared into the upper atmosphere, leaving the shattered wreck behind. Cade sat by the window, watching the stars blink into view. The glowing chain link was still warm in his hand, beating like a quiet echo of something ancient. He hadn't spoken during the flight. The medics gave up trying. He wasn't hurt in the way they could treat. His mind was still trapped in that moment, when she disappeared into the rift, wrapped in fire and shadow. Above him, the ship's comms crackled. Lieutenant Cade, report to command briefing when ready. Debrief begins in 30 minutes. He acknowledged with a short reply, but inside he wasn't ready. He wasn't even sure what to say. How could he explain her to people who only understood weapons and threats? She had been more than both. When they landed on the orbital base, he stepped out with the chain still in his palm. Officers stared at it, as if it were a weapon. Scientists whispered each other, scanning its glow from afar. None dared ask for it directly. A commander approached. Lieutenant, we've reviewed the logs. Most are corrupted or missing, but we tracked the energy surge. Whatever happened down there, it wasn't part of any known tech. What did you bring back? Cade looked at the link, then at the man. Not a weapon, not a prisoner, just a warning, and maybe a second chance. They tried to separate him from the chain. He refused. They threatened court-martial. He stood firm. In the end, they relented. Official records marked the object as unstable artifact, human custody pending evaluation. Weeks passed. The chain stayed with him. It never stopped pulsing. And sometimes, when he was alone, he heard her voice. Not clearly, not words, but feelings, emotions that drifted into his chest like forgotten memories. He saw flashes of her past. A facility full of mirrors and needles, faces watching her through glass. A life built for destruction, but filled with loneliness. Her only wish had been to stop the monster from hurting anyone again. Kay began studying the symbols etched into the chain. They weren't just decoration. They told a story. Warnings, instructions, but also something else. Keys, pieces of a language meant to hold or release something greater than flesh. One night, during a system blackout, the chain flared suddenly. Red light filled the room. Kay grabbed it tight, afraid it might be activating. But then her voice filled the silence clearly. I'm still here. He's weaker now. You gave me a path. I found something inside him, a flaw, a place to strike. I can win, but I need more time. Cade nodded, even though she couldn't see him. I'll wait. I'll protect the link. Just tell me when you're ready. The light faded. Silence returned. But the chain no longer pulsed with fear. It beat with purpose. Cade began building a chamber. Not a prison. A vessel. A place where she could return, without bringing the monster with her. He worked in secret. He worked with hope. The galaxy thought it was safe again. They didn't know how close they came to ruin. But one man remembered, and one girl, lost in the rift, was still fighting from within, and the chain, resting on his desk, glowed brighter with every passing day.